After the Winter by Claude McKay. Someday, when the trees have shed their leaves, and against the morning's white, the shivering birds beneath the eaves have sheltered for the night, we'll turn our faces southward, love, towards the summer isle, where bamboo spires the shafted grove and the wide-mouthed orchids smile. And we will seek the quiet hill, where the towers the cotton tree, and leaps the laughing crystal rill, and works the droning bee. And we will build a cottage there, beside an open glade, with black-ribbed bluebells blowing near, and the ferns that never fade.
We worked in the yard as a family yesterday, pulling weeds and trimming trees. We had to yank out weeds only to have mud fly everywhere. And everywhere we pulled a weed, we saw worms, ants, and spiders. It was gross. But we had to clear areas to allow our flowers to grow, and they are growing. They are red and yellow, pink and purple, and they smell so good. We saw birds fly all over the yard, including a bright red cardinal. Finally, our cat watched us the entire time through the screen door. He watched the birds flying, and he watched some of the bugs. It made my dad think of a poem by Walt Whitman about a noiseless, patient spider that wanted to make a connection. It made my dad think that maybe what it takes to make a connection with a spider is a spring day, some birds, and a cat. Sitting in the shade on a warm spring day, I heard, saw, and felt the call of life around me. I heard the call of noiseless, patient spider sitting atop his promontory as it launched filament out of itself. It landed in my heart of hearts and quivered with the sound of sunlight. It connected he and me as we sat together, engaging in the work of love. Living in connection, soul to heart, soaking the same common sun. I saw the birds above us, bearing witness to our sacrament, the soft shuffling of feathers, a susurrus of silent saints, sanctifying the soul dance of spider and me. I felt the kitten at my feet, rumbling with contentment, staring into the void to fill it, overflowing with the meaning of the moment. With each in-breath and out-breath, he brought in spider, bird, sun, and me, and launched us commingled into eternity.
Last year was my first Maypole celebration here, as I was a candidate for ministry, and we were giving careful instructions on how to create a beautiful weave of ribbon, alternating high and low, going clockwise and counterclockwise. We began our slow Maypole dance just outside this wall, and all of a sudden, a small, energetic child began running underneath them all, as if this had become a little NASCAR track, and he was going as fast as he could. If jollity and gloom were contending for an empire, clearly this little one was taking jollity into his hands, and he was running with it. And eventually, after infusing the space with good, fun, laughing energy, he found a way to weave his ribbon in with the rest seamlessly, as if this was always the practice. What struck me most throughout that ritual as we weaved our ribbons together, we got closer together, more deeply woven. And to do that, the tallest among us, which was me often with many of the children, needed to bow down the most. The ribbons woven together in the dance of the Maypole remind us that we are but one strand among many, that we literally bow down to one another. and we bow down to the spring in reverence, and together we weave our individual colors and threads and create something that reaches into the sky with beauty. Perhaps that's a spiritual lesson for any of us, to create space in the middle of our lives. Pay attention to whatever it is that calls us beyond ourself, beyond the ego, to find something, whatever we call it or however we experience it, that is beautiful enough to bow down to. Our monthly theme for May is humility. May is also when Muslims will observe Ramadan this year, in a practice of feasting at night, but fasting throughout the daylight hours, reminding them of the fragility and the sacredness of life. When I was in college, I had a friend who was Muslim, and Ramadan was in the month of December, and he was studying in Minnesota, where that was not his home. And he was very grateful for the amount of daylight in December in Minnesota that he had to fast. So he's like, I can do Ramadan here every year. This is great. I've always admired the deep devotion of Muslim prayer, stopping 5 times a day, far more than I do, in a posture of reverence and connection to Allah, connection to millions of others around the world, making space in their day for breath and devotion. And I wonder sometimes about how such a practice changes a person, how such regular practices of reverence or prayer or meditation orient the heart towards something larger than the ego, towards something that nourishes the spirit, how doing that several times a day might change how you move and breathe and live in the world. Submit to a daily practice, writes the Muslim mystic Rumi. Your loyalty to this, he says, is a ring on the door. Keep knocking, and the joy inside will eventually open a window and look out to see who's there. Keep knocking, Rumi says, and the joy inside will eventually open a window to look out and see who's there. Justice activist Adrienne Marie Brown writes about communities, wondering about how we move together, travel together in different ways, and learning from different species in our institutions and in the wider world. She writes, "My dream is a movement of such deep trust that we move as if we're in a murmuration. The way groups of starlings billow and dive and spin, dancing collectively through the air to avoid predators, but also, it seems, she says, to pass time in the most beautiful way possible. Here's how it works with a murmuration," she writes. "Each creature is tuned in to its neighbors, and creatures right around it in the formation. This might be the birds on either side or the 6 fish in each direction. There is a right relationship, a right distance between them. Too close and they'll crash. Too far away and they can't feel the micro-adaptations of the other birds. Each creature is shifting in direction, speed, proximity, based on the information of the other creatures' bodies around them. There is a deep trust to this," she writes. "To lift, because the birds around you are lifting. To live based on your collective real-time adaptation. In this way, thousands of birds or fish or bees move together, each empowered with the basic rules and a vision to live." And finally, she says, "Imagine our movements cultivating this type of trust and this type of depth with each other, having strategic flocking in our playbooks." I love that phrase she uses, strategic flocking. That's what community at its best can be, this intention of community, where we attend to those around us, we adjust, we adapt, we make space for different beliefs and styles and ideas and identities. We make space by adjusting our posture, adjusting our spirit, to meet with openness and grace the complexity and the diversity of the world. We've had a decent amount of crows near our house this year, sometimes flying down in groups that for a moment makes you wonder if you're in a Hitchcock movie. And we were talking about crows and talking about their bad reputation, which seems to be mainly Hitchcock's fault. And then, by some strange coincidence, after we turned off something else we were watching on Netflix one evening, up popped a PBS documentary on crows. So I sat there for a few moments in this late-night daze of, how did this happen? Why are there crows on the TV now? They're everywhere. But I was mesmerized by this PBS documentary, which makes me either smart or weird. But one study in particular fascinated me. Now, crows are smart. They figure out little tasks or tricks placed in front of them by researchers. And in this instance, there was food in a closed container. The top could either be pushed in by the beak to break or pulled off the top to access the food. So they split this murder into two little murders of crow, and they taught one crow to break it open by pecking at it. And then all the other crows in that group did the same. In the other group, they taught it to pull off the top, and then all the other crows, when their chance came, did the same. Now, this was not some earth-shattering discovery necessarily, but was a new realization for these ornithologists that these birds will teach and learn complex skills based on the birds around them. They are more social than their individualistic, mean stereotype. Similar to flying geese, who find lift and air from the draft of the birds around them, and they take turns leading and following so that wings won't overtire, the leader will grow tired and then fall back as another one comes to take the lead and to keep the draft going. If we meet each other in a certain way, it's often reciprocated. If we meet each other with a posture of aggression, it's often met with aggression. If we meet each other with a spirit of negativity, it's often met with negativity. But if we approach each other with a posture of grace or humility, and reverence or appreciation or curiosity, with hopeful and glad hearts, often the return is the same. When we feel the wind beneath our wings and adjust our path, based on our proximity of body and heart to those around us, we are able to sometimes lead, sometimes follow, so that we can offer our gifts and step back, take a rest, and together we fly. Lay me low, sang the choir. Not to some place of shame or diminishment or a place of less than, but a place of lowering the ego, stepping off any pedestal that places us over or above anyone else, reminding us to be connected to the earth, so grounded in how we live and how we breathe and how we move together that we can pause and we can rest and we can breathe and be cloaked, covered, showered in beauty and wonder and awe that washes over us like music. You can't weave together a maypole of ribbon and color, of stories and hopes, of identities and dreams, without stopping to at least acknowledge, if not bow in reverence, to those right around you. Otherwise, you'll run right into them, you'll stumble, you'll knock each other over, and that weave and the web of life will begin to fray and break apart. Humility is not to be ashamed of who one is, but to be reminded that we are but one strand among many in the weave and the dance that makes up the color and the vibrancy of this world and this life. So what has caused you to pause, either in intentional daily spiritual practice or some unexpected moment that has stopped you in your tracks? What has caused you? Where have you found yourself in some way so taken by the beauty or the wonder of something, someone, someplace, that you have felt no other worthy response than for your heart, your soul, even your body to settle into a posture of reverence, of gratitude, as if you had almost bowed your head to the ground in humility or wonder at the beauty before you? We must gather color and gather beauty all winter long before the spring. We must gather all night before the dawn of a new day. We must gather color and beauty and love our whole lives to pass on something of worth, something worth the living to the world and the generations beyond us. What spirit, what energy, what air are we casting to those around us? And what air is lifting us up? What beauty are we struck by in one another in our common rhythm that we are willing to bow down to in wonder, in awe, so that we might be lifted up? The closing hymn is the Bells of Norwich. You can find it in your order of service. I invite you to rise in body or spirit. I invite you, as you are comfortable, to grab a hand next to you or a shoulder, or place your hand on your heart, and breathe deep the breath of life. When we find our rhythm, and we add our color, and we bow in reverence to one another and the beauty of this world, all shall be well again, if it starts in the spirit, in the heart, and grows from there. May it be so. Amen. After our postlude, I invite you to quickly grab a cup of coffee if you want, or just move out to the Circle Drive where we'll have our annual celebration of the Maypole.